This is Relocalizing Vermont on GDR. Today we're focusing on topics around the conference coming up this Saturday, the Vermont Energy and Climate Action Network annual conference. VCAN.net is the place to go for more information about that. The interview with Ian Hitchcock was recorded on Tuesday. Well, there are two keynote speakers at this one-day conference. Bill McKibben starts things off in the morning, and in the afternoon, it's the communications director for the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, and also the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. Michael Shank, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Carl.
We're recording this on Tuesday. It's a snowy day in Vermont. The power went out on your road yesterday, and yet you're talking to me over the internet. How are you doing that?
I am talking to you in a home that is thankfully heated still. We don't have power because of the snowstorm, and I've got Tesla Powerwall batteries that I'm leasing for $15 a month from Green Mountain Power. And so that's how I've got my power. Now I've got some solar panels to recharge them if I can clear the snow off them and if we get some snow in the coming days. But for now, the Tesla Powerwall batteries in this incredible partnership with Green Mountain Power are providing heat and light for me right now.
When you say they're providing heat, are they the source of the heat, the electricity for a heat pump, or are they running something else?
Yeah, I've got heat pumps that I installed when I installed my solar panels. And so they're providing power for all of that. And I've got my animals in my farm and barns as well. So they're thankful for the de-icers that are charged in the wall that the Powerwall batteries are supporting as well. So yeah, it's an incredible deal. And I know other people on my road want to sign up and have tried to sign up for these Powerwall batteries, but the wait list is long. And I don't know how much Green Mountain Power and Tesla can scale up for all of Vermont, but I heartily encourage folks to sign up if they haven't already. It's an amazing opportunity.
Have you gone through power outages with these batteries before during the winter?
I have. And when I moved in a year ago to my farm, we were without power for several days. And I knew then that I didn't want to be in that situation again. And what's great about the Powerwall batteries is that they're quiet, they're clean. And I know people with generators are often frustrated by the noise and the dirtiness of them. So making sure everyone who wants this opportunity seizes it, it's both energy security so that I can still have heat when the power's down, the grid's down, but it's also cleaner energy in terms of the alternatives, which are generators, which are expensive, dirty, loud, etc.
Right. Well, how long do you anticipate with your current use for the heat and electricity that these batteries will last if the sun doesn't come out?
It's a great question, and I don't know, and It's always a little bit tenuous. With two Powerwall batteries, which was the max I could lease, I'm supposed to have a couple days worth of power, so fingers crossed I'll be able to stay warm and maybe invite my neighbors over to camp out here as well in case they need a warm home.
Great. Well, maybe we better get on with the interview in case the batteries give out mid-interview.
There you go.
You're going to be giving the afternoon keynote this Saturday at the VCAN conference at the Lake Maury Resort, the 11th annual, and this will be the one that is keeping people around. It's designed to go after the break, after the afternoon workshops, and before the 4:30 networking reception. This is the one they've scheduled to be very attractive to people, keep them around. So you've got to be exciting. You've got a big job.
Thanks for that challenge. I look forward to
it. From Apathy to Action, Motivating the Masses on Climate is the title of your talk. And you're communications director for the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance. Tell us about this group.
Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance represent the vanguard globally when it comes to climate leadership in cities. These are cities that have committed to the most ambitious targets and timelines, up to 100% renewable energy, 100% greenhouse gas emission reduction, zero waste. You name it, these cities have committed to it, and now they're charting the path to make sure they are zero waste or 100% renewable or 100% greenhouse gas emissions reduced by 2050 or before. Some have even more aggressive 2040, 2030 timelines. So these are cities that are leading. The reason I'm so attracted to these cities and love working with them is that they have the closest reach to the public. Most people in a city will know their mayor or city council member and maybe have talked with them before. I have spent time in the past working in the U.S. Congress and working with the United Nations and the Vatican, and all of those efforts were important from a from a climate perspective, but I find the city work so much more fulfilling because it's closer to the ground, it's closer to the people, and cities can often move faster than the UN or Congress can.
Do you find that the partisan gridlock that afflicts our national politics, that you find less of it in the cities you work with?
Yeah, you'll see Republican mayors and Democratic mayors across the country moving on climate because they see the economic opportunity, they see the health opportunity, they see the security opportunity. When you have cleaner energy, you've got healthier citizens. When you've got more efficient energy, you're making money as a city. And when you've got these opportunities to be off grid if necessary and to store your power and generate it renewably, you've got an energy independence that isn't reliant on fossil fuels. So I think mayors of all stripes across this country are making the switch because they see the benefits economically, health, and security.
Do you want to tell us a story or two about a city that you work with that people might not expect to be taking action on the leading edge of climate change work, and yet they've got great projects?
Sure. Well, San Diego is a great example of this, where they've got a Republican mayor and they've committed to 100% renewable energy as a goal, which is an awesome goal. And why not? Because you're going to make money off of a renewable energy source versus a finite fuel source that you burn once and it's gone. So these mayors are recognizing the opportunity there. Georgetown, Texas has a Republican mayor. He was featured in Inconvenient Sequel. Folks have seen that film. But he's an evangelist for a switch to solar. And he sees the economic benefits to his town as a result. And Texas, as a state, is leading in renewables in a really miraculous way. You wouldn't expect it necessarily because it often tends to be a red state, but they are seeing the opportunities in wind and just maximizing off them. So there are countless stories. You know, I used to write articles all the time with a Republican member of Congress, Roscoe Bartlett, who had a Prius, had a passive solar house, and made the switch to more energy efficient everything. You fill in the blank. Long before some of his Democratic colleagues did. So there are plenty of Republicans who understand the benefits of conservation when it comes to energy, and they're making money off it. And so they're making the switch because it makes sense to the pocketbook.
Roscoe Bartlett must have been fascinating to work with. He was one of the most peak oil aware members of Congress during
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And he used to give lectures to his colleagues in Congress about peak oil.
He pounded the pavement in the pulpit as often as he could. He was often on that House floor talking about peak oil.
Well, in your work there and in other places, you've picked up some philosophies and tips about effective communication, and that's what you'll be talking about on Saturday, on effective communication around climate change. Tell us about some of the tips and tricks that you'd like people coming to this conference to come away with. I understand that more piling on the facts about dire scenarios from climate change is maybe not the best recipe for motivating action.
That's right, Carl. We tend to rely on facts, but facts don't often move people. So I'm going to encourage us to be in campaign mode, just like a political candidate would be in campaign mode, 24/7, 365. Let's pursue this as a campaigner might. And before I jump into some tips or M's, I'll call them 12 M's that we'll discuss today on this call, but also at the talk this weekend. When it comes to attitudes and behaviors in this country, the attitudes are supportive of climate action. Majority of America believes that climate change is happening. Majority of America supports ramping up funding for renewable energy. Majority of America believes that we should regulate greenhouse gas emissions. So those are strong majorities. They know climate change is happening. They support renewable energy. They support capping greenhouse gas emissions because they're dirty, but a small minority of America is doing anything about it. Small minorities, like 10, 14%, in the teens, are calling their elected officials about climate change, are contacting their media about climate change, are changing their consumption habits, switching to plant-based diets or having smaller families or switching to organics or something more sustainable in the fair trade space. So we need to close that gap. We need attitudes to match behaviors because right now they're not. And so when I think about campaign mode, I think about the following M's. I'll just list a few of them. I don't need to list all of them, but making our messages more compelling to a broader majority. So oftentimes environmentalists will lead with the facts and figures and the data and the science. And in fact, what most Americans often think about first and foremost are the economics. Are they going to save money making the switch? Are they going to save money when they button up their house and make it a little tighter so it's not as leaky, so that when they do fuel it with whatever fuel they've got, they're not wasting money off it? And so the economics here are important, I think, to talk about. The health benefits in Vermont. We lose a couple hundred Vermonters every year to air pollution. Globally, the numbers are overwhelming. 6.5 million people die every year from air pollution. So if we just want to save lives, which also helps the economy because someone dead can't contribute to the economy. If we want to save lives, we'd switch to cleaner fuels and safer fuels instead of these dirty fuels. So the economics, the health, and then security. And my experience today is a great example of that in terms of I'm without power, but I'm energy independent from the grid because I've got solar panels, I've got my Powerwall batteries backing me up, and I've got heat pumps that I can fire up to keep me warm. So those are the benefits that we should talk about. Those are the messages we should talk about. And then I'll just give another M and then pass it back to you. In terms of messengers, a lot of, and I'm guilty of this too, because I'm a white man, but a lot of white men are front and center in this movement. If you think about the Global Climate Action Summit that happened in San Francisco, you see a lot of white men on the stage, and we need to diversify the movement, and we need messengers that represent the whole of America, that represent every diverse person on this planet. And for a long time, white men have been positioning themselves front and center in the movement. And in fact, the movement is much more diverse and the leaders are much more diverse. And so we need to make sure they've got a space for that, and that the white men, the wealthier white men that I'm not naming, but folks can probably identify, step aside and create space for the diversity that is out there, that is leading the movement in myriad ways. So those are just two of the M's that I'll discuss on Saturday.
Well, I'm a white man, and we've got Ian Hitchcock earlier on this program, another white man, but we do have a white woman, Kate Stevenson, coming up in a little bit to tell us about the work done in Montpelier on climate change. So a little bit of diversification in this.
That's great.
For those just tuning in, we're talking with Michael Shank. He is the communications director for the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, and that works globally with cities that are committed to achieve aggressive long-term carbon reduction goals, and also a North American network called the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, and that is local government professionals from cities across the continent who are creating a healthier environment and economic prosperity with their work. He is giving the afternoon keynote address at the VCAN conference, Vermont Vermont Energy and Climate Change Action Network conference that's taking place this Saturday, and we're talking about communication, ways to communicate and motivate people to take action on climate change. Tell us about your impressions, Michael, of the communication that has taken place since last Friday, when at 2 p.m., slow news time, the White House thought, they dumped the U.S. government latest report on climate change and its impacts. One of the big messages that I've seen in the mainstream media coming from that is that climate change could cut 10% from the U.S. economic output by 2100, just because of all its impacts. And I'm thinking, well, yes, that addresses one of your points, which is to talk about the economic impacts of climate change, but still 2100 is a long ways out there. What are your thoughts on that message and other things you've seen in the media around this latest report?
That's a great question, because that is not a data point that I will use going forward as a messenger. The message I would use that comes out of the National Climate Assessment, there are a couple of things that come out of the National Climate Assessment that I think are useful. One, that it is issued by the Trump administration, which I think is important. It's 13 federal agencies across the administration of every stripe coming together in a consensus-forming fashion. You even had businesses involved, you had nonprofits involved. Every spectrum of American society was involved in the production of this National Climate Assessment. And they noted rightly that 16 of the last 17 years were the hottest on record. So we're seeing these trends, but they also noted that we will see, if we don't act now, we will see over $100 billion worth of hits to our economy every year, annually. And that's actually a conservative number. I've seen much higher numbers that have already stated that we've seen over $200 billion worth of economic impact, adverse economic impact to our economy because of climate change.
That's going on right now, not in 2100.
That's going on right now. That's right.
So 100 to $250 billion annually.
Yep.
And these would be
So,
things like the impact of the increased wildfires.
yep, it's our response to all of these extreme weather events, whether it's Hurricane Sandy that hit New York so hard and cost well over $100 billion that Congress issued $60 billion for, or it's these wildfires, which we'll see more of, and these apocalyptic, Hollywood-esque movie scenes from these devastating extreme weather events that will only become more frequent if we don't do everything we can to switch to a cleaner fuel system. So, yeah, these are impacts happening now. We don't even need to talk about 2100 to impress upon ourselves and the American people that devastation is real. It's happening now. And it's because of climate change.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Let's talk about some other of the M's that you described for messaging on climate change. And for those who are interested, if you go to Huffington Post and look for articles written by Michael Shank, Shank, then his article, 12 Ways to Improve Climate Change Communications from, just about exactly a year ago, will give you lots more details on all these M's.
Yeah, I'll raise a few more up in this conversation. So one is around moments. And by moments, I mean seizing the media news cycle. As an example, with the wildfires happening in California, I was disappointed to not see more celebrities who were impacted by those fires messaging on the climate context. And I was trying to feed all my friends in California with as many talking points so that when they're working with these celebrities who have been impacted by these fires, Gerard Butler, Kim Kardashian, Alyssa Milano, and others, who are activists in other ways, I very much wanted them to seize the platform because the press was watching nationally, internationally, to seize this moment and contextualize these wildfires within a climate understanding, climate changed understanding. So we're often not seizing as many moments as we could be, so that when people are reading about the fires, thinking about the fires, they're understanding it within a bigger, broader context. So that's one M. Another M is the memification of everything. And by memification, I mean that anything we do needs to have a meme to it. That there's so much conversation happening in social media now that if we're not making our work palatable to that space and creating a meme for that space, we're missing an opportunity to reach a lot of people who are getting their news from social media, who are spending a lot of time on social media. And so in the environmental space, we haven't always done a great job historically of making it meme friendly, but we need to move in that direction. That's another M. And then let me just offer one more M and then pass it back to you. In terms of reaching out to the mainstream majority, the climate community has in the past, when they've relied on facts and figures and science and data, often relied on language that isn't being used by most of the public, or perhaps is too dense in its science. And that's everything from anthropogenic to climate forcers, which is a term that somebody was trying to encourage me to use. And I said, well, most of the people I know don't use the term climate forcers. They understand what pollution is, and so we could talk about climate pollutants. This is in the context of short-lived climate pollutants, which is a bipartisan issue in Congress. But when we talk about these issues, we want to make sure we're using language that the mainstream majority is using. And every time we use a word that the mainstream majority isn't using, we make it all the more difficult for people to come on board the issue, get involved, and share it with their friends and family, et cetera. So those are just a few more M's before I kick back to you.
Well, that might be difficult for some people to make their language simpler. In your article in the Huffington Post, when you're talking about the importance of doing so, one paragraph uses the words esoteric, grandiloquent, monosyllabic, and onus.
That's right. That's right. So we all do this when we're pontificating on something. We'll use long words or multisyllabic words to make us look smart, but we really don't have time for that kind of egocentric communication anymore. We need to speak simply for everyone's benefit.
Well, Michael Shank, what do you do all day as communications director for the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance? How do you put these lessons into effect in your workaday life?
Yeah, so my cities are globally committing to those aggressive targets and timelines that I mentioned earlier in the call. But I'm also trying to course correct, because to my previous point about appealing to the mainstream majority and using language that we all use commonly every day, carbon neutrality is a great example of a term that people aren't using. The public is not talking about net zero anything, or carbon neutrality anything. And so I'm strongly encouraging my cities to actually stay away from that language and not use carbon neutrality. One, because it's hard to get fired up and excited and build a movement and momentum. That's another M I talk about in my article. People want to be a part of a movement. And especially when it comes to climate issues, they can feel overwhelmed by it. I know my family certainly does when they think about their impact as part of a broader global impact. People want to be a part of a movement as a result. And when we use terms like net zero or carbon neutrality, it's hard to get fired up and be a part of a movement that's like, yeah, what do we want? Carbon neutrality. When do we want it now? Versus, alternatives would be people understand zero and they understand 100%. So we want 100% renewable energy. We want our entire town to be powered by renewable energy, solar, wind, etc. They understand that. They can get behind that. It's clear. Same with zero. Zero waste. We want zero waste in our community. We want to send zero waste to the landfill. They get that. They understand that. So I know some people in some cities are stuck and committed to their carbon neutrality and net zero, fill in the blank. But part of my job and part of my interest, my passion on this is to make sure we're using language that people can get excited about, because that's pretty important.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for that overview, and I look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Thanks so much, Carl. Appreciate the opportunity.
That was Michael Shank. He is a communications director for the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance and the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. His interview was recorded on Tuesday. I'm Carl Etnier here on Relocalizing Vermont. This hour, we are previewing the VCAN event coming up this Saturday. That's the Vermont Energy, Climate, and Action Network.